Peace and greetings. Welcome, world. This is 360 Collective, transmitting live all over the country and hopefully all over the world. It is wonderful that you are with us this evening. For those that do not know who 360 Collective is, we are an education consulting cooperative. We work directly with educators, with teachers, with administrators, with district leaders to help them meet unprecedented challenges with uncommon, dynamic, creative solutions. We also host free online conversations and workshops, such as the one that we are hosting tonight. We will get into this conversation in just a second, and we will talk a little bit more about it. When we have these conversations, we love for our audience to engage with us. So even though we will be doing a lot of knowledge tonight with you and sharing a lot of our own insight with you, we hope that you as well will interact, react, and share your insight with us, because we know that we can learn from your insight, just as we hope you take something away from our insight as well. I have my esteemed brothers with me, Mr. Abayuni Dukes, the conscious one. Peace. And we also have the esteemed, the illustrious Mr. Timothy Hampton, the militant wise one. Welcome, my good brothers. It is wonderful to be with you both tonight. We are going to kick this conversation off in just a second, but before we do that, I think that it would be remiss to not discuss the tragic execution of Marcellus Khalif Williams, which happened within the last hour or so. He was put to death in the state of Missouri for a crime that a lot of evidence, new evidence, suggests he did not in fact commit. His case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was the Supreme Court who today decided that they would not entertain any new evidence in his case and would not allow for any stay or retrial or reexamination of his case. The governor in the state of Missouri also refused any consideration of new evidence, despite the fact that the prosecutors in the case themselves acknowledged the possibility of Marcellus Williams not committing the crime, and said that if there's any shadow of a doubt that this execution should be stayed. Despite all of that and all of the momentum around and activism around Marcellus Williams, he was put to death. So we grieve for his family. We cry injustice, and we are, of course, saddened and deeply disappointed by his death and his execution. It is worth pointing out that since 1976, there's been a racial discrepancy when it comes to the number of people and the ratio of people who are put to death, particularly when we look at Black defendants such as Marcellus Williams and the alleged victims in those cases being white. In this case, you can see that since 1976, 299 Black defendants have been put to death when the alleged victims have been white. That was the case in Marcellus Williams's situation. And so we think that it's important to point out the disparity, racial disparity, and the influence of race in the use of this kind of punishment. And then also there's a disproportionate representation of the number of Black people who have been put to death since 1976. 34% of all those executed since 1976 have been Black. We find this statistic to be a glaring piece of evidence suggesting the deep injustice that is our so-called justice system. It is one of the reasons why point 5 and point 6 in the 360 Collective platform demands for the reimagining of justice in this country and the way that justice is meted out. So I'll pause there. I know that we all felt strongly about acknowledging this terrible tragedy. I'm curious to know what is on your mind, my good brothers.
For me personally, I know this post was up on the Facebook page, and I acknowledged it then that they don't execute people like us as a question of justice or injustice, of guilt or innocence. They execute people like us to send a message to people like us and the rest of the world that they are the superior beings, and that, you know, they do these things to prove themselves, these base, horrific, ruthless, merciless, tyrannous, oppressive things to prove that they are superior. uh, so, there's no logic to it. It's not even a question of guilt or innocence. It's not even a question of right and wrong. It's a question of white supremacy.
White
And
supremacy.
you know, and I said on the Facebook page, you have a lot of black and brown corrections officers and administrators and even wardens across the South, and they don't have any of this information. They don't know about any of his innocence, or there's nothing that anyone can do. Black, white, brown, purple, green, nothing anyone can do. I find it laughable.
Mm. How about you, Dukes? Any thoughts on this before we move
Um,
ahead?
I think it's kind of saddening, just the thought that when everybody wanted a reexamination of of the case, and the governor just said no to it. You know what I'm saying? The governor said no to it. So it's like, I guess one part about this is the question is why, and why, and I don't know if we ever figure out why, but why? I think investigations to be done why.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts on that, my good brothers. With that, we will move ahead, and of course, we will post more on our Facebook page. If you have not liked or followed our page, be sure that you do so at some point this evening. We will post more about this tragedy in the coming days. We will stay on the lookout to find any information related to how we maybe can support financially the family at this tragic time, and we'll put that on our page for sure in the coming days. With that said, we've been planning this conversation for quite a while. It feels a bit strange to have this conversation in light of the tragedy that has befallen today. However, the conversation, I think, is also even more timely in light of what has happened and occurred today. And so, with that said, I would love to hear from you, Brother Hamp. Tell us more about the inspiration for this program. You're going to be doing the lead facilitating as we go in just a couple more minutes here. But before we jump into the content, I would love for you to tell me and tell our audience a little bit more about why you felt like this was an important conversation to have right now.
Well, as you know, I have expatted. I'm an immigrant to another country now. I now live and work in the country of Belize. And it was a visit home that inspired this topic, this presentation, and this program, because I took a look around at the people closest to me, and I thought to myself, "Wow, we are those people, the upper middle class, extending to black elitism and black exceptionalism and these things that E Franklin Frazier wrote about." And see, I read the book for the first time probably over 30 years ago, and much of the content stuck with me to the point where once I left the United States and came back and took a look around at what was happening in society, including with my own family, I was like, wow, this is really much more clear to me now how this all works. So I wanted to put this presentation together for 360 and get it up and running.
Okay. Right on, Tim. And we are excited that you have done this, and we look forward to supporting you and engaging with you as you lead us through this conscious content. As I mentioned before, my name is Isaac Castellez. I'm the host, but I'm not the facilitator of this program. Tim will be kicking it off in just a second. But I do want to say, before we get into the content, that I want you to engage in the conversation. As you do so, we will post your comments. We feel very strongly about making sure that when you have a comment, we acknowledge the comment, we pause, react to the comment, and even post the comment directly on our screen. For example, this is what it will look like if you post. This is one that we put up just a second ago in the chat. When you respond to something you hear, we will post it on the screen just like this. We want to acknowledge your insight and your reactions, and we want to build off it, because we know that when you are engaged, the conversation becomes more enriching, more powerful, and more insightful. Although we have content we want to share with you, and hopefully you take something from it, we want to also hear from you and take something away from you and your insight as we go. So when you see this particular graphic pop up on your screen, it means for real. We want to know what you're thinking. We want you to drop a comment, even if it's something simple, so that we can post it and get a temperature check of what you, our audience, are thinking or feeling at that very moment. So don't be shy with your comments. We want to engage you in this conversation as we go. So with that said, Brother Timothy Hampton, are you ready to kick it off for us?
Absolutely. Let's get this thing started.
All right, let's get it started.
Okay, in reference to E. Franklin Frazier's work about the black middle class, which he so famously termed the Black Bourgeoisie, I was thinking about this presentation based on a visit home to visit my family and friends in the United States, and it struck me, obviously, very powerfully, as to what I wanted to say. So I was watching a little Greek mythology on television, and if I came across this quote: "If all you know is darkness, you seek light." Now, this is Hades, which is a character from Greek mythology, and this is in reference to wanting to leave the underworld, which is a place of darkness and despair, you know. And I thought of that in reference to blackness, what it is today, what it has become, as opposed to what it used to be. If all you know is blackness, you seek white. You know, that's the Hampton 360 Collective. And what I want to do is get into my reasons for saying this. This is in reference to the negativity associated with blackness and all that it means in recent history and contemporary interpretations of what blackness is or what it means. For example, I think Black Lives Matter is associated with sheer and straight and utter terror right now, just the phrase for a lot of people. So my question to you guys is in reference to, if all you know is blackness, you seek white because of what blackness has become or what it is today. Is black still beautiful? Back in 1963, black is beautiful. Black was beautiful. In the 60s and 70s, black was beautiful. Is it still beautiful? You guys think? Why or why not?
That was not rhetorical, I guess.
No, it was not rhetorical. I would like to know, because, like I said, like what I'm finding is in the Black Bourgeoisie, if all you know is this negative representation or interpretation of blackness, then you begin to seek the exact opposite. And I will back this up. But black used to be beautiful. Black is beautiful. Black power. These things used to be sentiments and threads in society. Are they still? Is my question.
I would say yeah. I guess it depends on also who's looking and who's judging. But I would say yes for myself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For the whole, is that still a ideal? God, that's a good one. Because you don't see it. You don't see it as you don't. There's not the feeling.
You don't hear it. You don't see it or hear it or experience it as much anymore the way you once did in relation to different things. So I don't think it is anymore. I don't think it is.
Okay.
I don't think black's beautiful anymore. I think black now is is a thing that people are once again a little bit afraid of, a little bit afraid of, you know. So let me move on to this next slide. It is really the cover of the book. This is E. Franklin Frazier's groundbreaking work from 1955, where he really explained his premise that the black middle class has failed the black masses in a leadership capacity. And by the way, I'll be using bourgeois in place of bourgeoisie. I think it's just easier for me. And E. Franklin Frazier's theory was that the black middle class, actually in pursuit of the American dream and the finer things, had really lost sight of their responsibility to be leaders and examples for the larger black community. And in that respect, were a detriment to the black community at large. But I think what E. Franklin Frazier could not have predicted was the emergence of the black upper middle class, which extends to the black super elite in politics and entertainment and sports. We have a class of people that has proliferated that never really existed before to this extent in our community. Now, we've had some stars, but nothing like the proliferation of stars that we have now. So they have shifted the paradigm. The Tyler Perrys and the Candace Owens and, you know, the Ice Cubes and the Obamas and the LeBron Jameses, they've shifted the paradigm of what the black bourgeois used to be, which is regular straight black middle class, to now this elite, black elite and super elite. So,
Brother Ham,
yeah,
check out what Letitia says.
Mhm.
And if I am mispronouncing your name, my deepest apologies. Letitia says, I feel like black excellence is connected to white capitalism. So
absolutely.
What do you guys think about what she said there?
Absolutely, because black excellence is based on status and status symbols that they are completely and 100% dependent on white capitalism to get. Well, you know, we can get into that. I actually have some information about that. She's 100% correct.
Okay, what about you, dude?
I would say the same thing. I think he talks about that in his book also, is that the it's the gauge in which we gauge is the rule in which we're gauging success on. So what's the ruler that we're gauging success on? Is it something that we have on our own, that we made up on our own, or is that excellence defined by something outside? Typically, it's something that's been gauged by something outside. So it's the same thing as beauty. How do we define beauty? Is that something that we defined ourselves, or is it something that we defined from the outside? So what are we gauging excellence and success as? And how was it be, you know, so if it's something that we define for ourselves, that's wonderful. But most likely it's going against what society has presented ourselves with. So whether it be the good or the bad, so black excellence is just something that, you know, the larger white society has given us. So yes, so we got to gauge it. So white people showed us this, so it got to be that.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple different ways that this could be taken. I think on one hand, and I know that you're going to talk more about this, Tim, black excellence is defined through standards of wealth, material, and status, right? And those are the things that I think Letitia is asserting when she says white capitalism. However, there's also another angle to this, which is that the term black itself, if I understand correctly, is itself a resistance to whiteness, right? I mean, it isn't a term that was assigned by white people to black people. It was a term that black people, and especially intellectuals and activists, asserted as a break from whiteness, right? Like, excuse my language, but if we go back, like words like Negro, for example, right? These were the ways that we whites defined black people for centuries and even through much of the 20th century. And so the idea of blackness is a relatively new phenomenon in the pantheon of this country's history. So when I think of blackness, I also think of resistance to white supremacy and to an extent to white capitalism. However, I think that the term is so dynamic, and why this conversation is so rich, especially for me as a white male, hopefully, just listening, rather than trying to define or shape. I think it's incredibly helpful to be part of this conversation. Here's something also, Tim, another comment, and then we'll jump ahead. Are there any Black people who only know blackness? Ooh, that's a really fantastic comment there. What do you guys think about that one?
I think that this comment was made in reference to mythology. It's not supposed to be taken literally. I don't think there are any people in the world who only know darkness. I don't think there are any people in the world who only know blackness. So I think it was just made in reference to a mythological kind of saying that if all you know is one interpretation of what something is, then you might seek the opposite.
But also on to what the other statement was, and there's nothing wrong with being excellent, right? The whole idea, but I think it's also how it's defined, who's defining it. You know what I'm saying? At some point, I mean, the word excellent means something. Being excellent means something, but how is it gauged? And sometimes it's when you have the power to define is where everything starts, right? Whose definition are we using for these words? Because as the young lady stated, was if you're coming from a capitalistic standpoint, it means something totally different if you're coming from a socialist idea or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So those things matter. Matter. The definition of the foundation of the definition matters.
Here's a further clarification by Lynn Cooper. I'm saying Lynn because I don't want to butcher your first name. My deepest apologies, Lynn. But Lynn says, what I mean is, are there people in the U.S. who work from a paradigm of blackness?
I think there's a possibility of that, but and you might be able to see small communities, working together to build things within certain communities, and typically they can be in bigger cities, maybe DC, Chicago, and maybe I think like Tim was saying earlier, that type of movement or that type of moving type stuff, it was done a long time ago, probably maybe around the 1990s. But do we see it now? I would say that it's there, but there's nobody promoting it, or there's no one telling us about these little enclaves or areas that are moving in that way.
Dukes, you remember when we went to Philadelphia and we were with the Black Panther vets?
Uh-huh.
We met a woman there who was basically young woman who was saying, like, I'm not even trying to change society. I'm working with, and you that word enclave is what reminded me. I'm working with my own group to create our own world, our own community offline of America, basically, and of white capitalism for the purpose of this conversation. This was a Black woman. And so I think that there are enclaves, and even this school that we did a video for, the Save Institute, they have a very pro-Black stance that is designed to support and educate Black boys outside of the traditional public school system. So I think that there are definitely enclaves who are attempting to simply abandon white supremacy altogether. So I think it's happening, but I think people who are doing it are not really in the public eye because they don't desire to be. Like the entire purpose of their work is to get off of the grid, so to speak. But anyway, Tim,
I think there are some organizations. I think the NAACP, the National Urban League, I think the Nation of Islam. I think all these groups move working through for about a paradigm of blackness. I think the black church, with the exception of the white Jesus, moves from a paradigm of blackness. I think, Tyler Perry's fans, the millions upon millions of them, move from a paradigm of blackness. I think there is definitely a paradigm of blackness flowing through the United States. Is it all black people? No. Is it everybody? Absolutely not. But I think there are enclaves, like you said.
All right, Tim. Here's another comment. I know you have more content loaded, but why don't you take this reaction, Tim, and then we'll move ahead. We won't all react to the comment, but Sultan says the actions, deeds, and words are the same for all humans. These same deeds in brown skin are seen as worse because of the social programming.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think that, and I'll get into that with the content that like you said, I have loaded up later.
Okay.
I think that he's absolutely right. What we do in seeking our own versions of freedom are seen as affronting or aggressive. But yeah, we can look at that. Let me cue up this video. This video was produced to illustrate my version of this argument, my version of E. Franklin Frazier's work, along with a little Carter G. Woodson thrown in there with the miseducation of the Negro. But y'all check this out, and we'll be right back. It's 3 minutes. The black bourgeois are a shapeless, directionless amoeba that insatiably consumes everything in its path. According to E. Franklin Frazier, historically, the black bourgeois has been a self-serving blob that has no desire to serve anything greater than itself. However, as prolific consumers, the black bourgeois generates an enormous amount of wealth and capital, primarily for the status quo, upon whom they are, like all of us, inextricably dependent for virtually everything. The reward for this enormous generation of wealth is status, usually in the form of some type of status symbol, all of which they must obtain from the status quo. They then use these symbols as excuses to separate and distance themselves philosophically, socially, and geographically from any and all aspects of the black masses. Unfortunately, and predictably, the voracious consumption, accumulation of status symbols, and even the self-serving self-isolation amounts to nothing but debt. Other than being part of the coveted black voting bloc, the black bourgeois still has no true social or political power in American society. This is because the black bourgeois' business interests, land holdings, and net worth are insignificant to the American economy. So what's left? A tremendous wealth generator and economic battery for the status quo. Due to very effective social constructs like public education, religion, capitalism, and white supremacy, the black bourgeois has no direction or will of its own. So think of it like an old Western. The black bourgeois have been harnessed like horses to pull the cart that is the black masses, while the status quo sits atop and controls the reins. Okay, so if you recognized yourself in there, it's going to be a hard night for you because we're really about to get into it. Like I was saying before, the emergence of the super elite in politics, in entertainment, in athletics have really shifted the paradigm as to what the Black bourgeois can can actually do and who they are. I wanted to go back to the presentation just briefly and let you have a peek at what I would consider the epitome right now of the Black bourgeois, which would be someone like Candace Owens, based on E. Franklin Frazier's arguments, who is like it states here, a right wing American commentator who has some very strong and very pointed opinions about Black America and Black Americans. I would use these excerpts from the book to kind of illustrate my point. This is E. Franklin Frazier, page 193. Because of its struggle to gain acceptance by whites, Frazier wrote, the Black bourgeois has failed to play the role of a responsible elite in the Negro community. It has exploited the Negro masses when the opportunities arose, and it has been obsessed with the struggle for status. I personally, would switch exploited to degraded and marginalized in the case of someone like a Candace Owens or any other that you guys could think of, like maybe a Tyler Perry or a Ice Cube, who came out supporting Trump.
Mark Robinson.
Mark Robinson, absolutely, excellent. I've got a slide about him coming up later.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, he's a prime example. Let me go back to this other slide, an excerpt from the book here. When the opportunity has been present, the Black bourgeois has exploited the Negro masses as ruthlessly as have whites. As the intellectual leaders in the Negro community, they have never dared to think beyond a narrow, opportunistic philosophy that provided a rationalization for their own advantages. The single factor that has dominated the mental outlook of the Black bourgeois has been its obsession with the struggle for status. And you have someone like a Mark Robinson. I'm sorry, here, let me go back to the presentation. Okay, you have someone like a Mark Robinson, okay, who has denigrated Martin Luther King, expressed support for reinstating slavery, said he would buy a few. You have the Jim Crow guy, I call him, Byron Donalds, who advocated for Jim Crow in the name of the Republican Party because I guess his contention was that Negroes were happier and more organized. So those would be examples of the Black bourgeois and the super elite in politics as informed by E. Franklin Frazier's writings. So my central question to you guys is there a Black community in the modern era? Do we have a community? Is there a Black community in the modern era?
Well, like I said before, also it comes down by definition. But yes, there is. I think that the Black community is there, and even by Franklin standards, as he's calling, the Black bourgeoisie, they're there too. And I think in this day, everybody's playing their role. But it's like, can we identify in 2024 what these people look like? If you're a 5%er, you had the 5, 10, and 85%, right? The blind, deaf, and dumb, and 5 people who have knowledge, and 10%, and the 10%, I guess, is where the 10% is where Franklin would call that the bourgeoisie, right? Um, what do they look like? I mean, he had a lot of critiques on organizations, had a lot of critique on the media, and those type of things. And are those same parts still there, present today, holding or not advancing the rest of us like they should? Even with W.E. Du Bois had the thing with the talented tenth, and there was holes in that idea. Maybe back then, maybe it seemed like a promising idea, um, but then at the same time, it was connected to capitalism. And so what happened was, I think that a lot of people just found themselves just being another example of white people, just black. I think sometimes that's what we see with the Black bourgeoisie is this: you just see black people, a middle class black people, just having white people ideas, white capitalist ideas. The
So
level.
you
Go ahead.
said that there is. You said that there definitely is a black community. Then,
Yes.
so my next question to you would be, does any of us, regardless of social strata, have an obligation to the masses slash lower strata of the so-called black community? Are we responsible for the lesser of us?
I mean, for me as a white man, this is kind of a tricky question for me because I think that it would be, I don't have the moral authority to say to the black bourgeoisie, why don't you help your people? Any more than I have I have moral authority to say to my own people, like, we must reimagine our world together, right? We must confront our own white supremacy. We must confront the privilege and undo the privilege that has been designed and constructed over the course of centuries in imagining this country. So for me, I hesitate to suggest that the black bourgeoisie or say more financially resourced black people have more of an obligation to other black people or to the black community than anybody else. I'm not going to, so I can't say yes or no to that, except to say that I think everyone has an obligation to serve society. I'm curious to know though what you guys think. Is there, as black men, do you feel more obligated to help black people and address issues that are affecting black communities in this country?
Let me. So one part about this is that understanding that there certainly is an obligation, I feel, for anybody to help anybody else to rise them up, right? I think that's just there, no matter who it is. But I think that the obligation for black people, and especially these people who have quote unquote made it, is because they made it under the guise of bringing people up. I think that's a lot of there's a lot of that somebody, that's a lot of it. I want to be I'm the only one. I'm the first black who's done this. Moving in certain neighborhoods or being the first to drive these cars. We're celebrating each other based on these ideas. I'm the first, or I'm doing it, and then hype me up or celebrate me to motivate other people to do it also. And so since I'm getting benefits from that, then I do have an obligation because I've gained something from it. I do have an obligation to try to pull someone up. I think the problem is that we found ourselves liking that isolationism. I'm the only one. I'm the first one, right? And that there's a certain type of I like the praise versus celebrating or distributing some of that wealth that comes along with it. One time I talked to somebody about going to a black university or going to a white university, and the brother told me, like, going to the white university, I was viewed different. As in, you go to a university with 30,000 students and 2,000 of them are black, you're viewed different, as in you're special. And going to a black university, you just like everybody else.
Mm.
And some people need that type of pat on the back. I'm special. I belong here, or as Frazier calls it, we latching on to Jim Crow, and so that level of being separate. I'm not, maybe so and so they still work on the farms, but we got our own house, and everybody in the community look up to us because we have our own house, or that's like the same thing as we're the preachers or whatever live in a certain neighborhood, and there's something about or being preachers in that town. It meant something for that position, right? And never wouldn't have let that go because it's something they got from that. And the goal, even though the goal or the idea is to pull people up, nobody put the hand out to bring people up at all, because you brought somebody else in there, you won't be the only one anymore.
Tim, what I want to get your thoughts. Let's get to a few of these comments. Let me read them, Tim, and then you take the first shot at responding to them. So this is Adame Craig or Adama Craig. Deepest apologies. Correct me in the chat. I want to make sure that I honor your names. So I apologize if I'm not saying it correctly. But the comment is, we used to take that on before integration. Once the keys to the executive washroom, end quote, were made accessible, Black rich folks were out. They shifted to the white savior model versus being in community with, right? So that's kind of like what you were saying. It seems like, Dukes. And then Carol says there is a Black community separated by culture and economic and health status. Each group has different goals. And then Letitia says, definitely a community, but is it the community that we want? And then Llewellyn says, I think there's a Black resistance working to create community. So some powerful comments there, Tim. I'm wondering which of those is resonating with you. What thoughts does this bring to mind for you?
I think these are all wonderful comments. The keys to the executive washroom, outstanding, because it's right in line with video and what it is I'm talking about. The Black community is separated by culture and economic and health status, and each of the groups does have incredibly different goals. That's what the presentation is about. The Black bourgeois in particular have different goals than the Black masses. And the Black community that we have is not the Black community that we want. We can't even define what our community is or will be because it is constantly under attack. I think, let me go back to the presentation really quick. I think the general consensus is that there definitely is a Black community. Because if there was no, then what about all the violence, economic, intellectual violence against the non-existent community? We definitely have a community, but the community that we want, we do not have, because our most talented, our most motivated, most fortunate, most capable, and most prepared citizens are focused on getting the hell away from there, striving not to only be accepted by the status quo in this country, but to maybe become a member of the status quo through faithful, fearless, patriotic adherence to what I call the American dream in the land.
Hey, Tim, you know what this makes me think of? It makes me think of someone that I know we all know and admire greatly, who passed away not too long ago, Sekou Odinga. Veteran member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. Sekou Odinga wrote once that like his white comrades in the struggle could define very easily what it meant culturally to be white, right? And it would often start with, oh, well, my Polish grandmother and my family moved from Belgium in 1908 and everything like that, right? Like there was a cultural consistency that he observed among his white comrades when he asked them, what does it mean to be white, right? And it seems like what this conversation is approaching is that there is not a positive cultural identity attached to the idea of Blackness.
Not anymore.
Right. And so one of the things that Sekou Odinga did was he helped to form the New African Party, and he was helping to acquire land in the South to establish an independent New African state. And so when you talk to Sekou Odinga anytime before, like 2014 on, after he got out of prison, he would always describe himself as a new African. And I always found that to be deeply interesting. And it goes back to things that he was even talking about in the 60s when he was underground and everything like that. So I'm just injecting that into the conversation to see if that jogs anything for you guys or for the audience. Let's see. I think there are a couple more comments here, Tim. Oh yeah, white supremacy is a hell of a drug. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And there's a process by which they get you that drug. There's a process. There's a whole indoctrination process, and I've tried to illustrate that process here in the presentation. The indoctrination process into the Black bourgeois would start with your education, your primary, secondary, post-secondary, or tertiary education. K through 12 was conceptualized, created, and implemented by status quo elites from the beginning. It was not developed as a multicultural undertaking to make sure everybody developed equally or positively. It's raw propaganda, myth, lies, innuendo, wild conjecture, junk science for hundreds of years. And now for the Black bourgeois, especially for these K through 12 years, this education should really be obtained in a so-called white community. The whiter, the better, for the good of the children and due to shared values, which, those last two are direct quotes that I've heard from the Black bourgeois. Those people share my values in Nebraska, in the suburbs, and all this kind of stuff. But I digress. Your post-secondary education, your college education, most of them established by Northern white missionaries to bring about the assimilation of European culture. And it goes back to the white man's burden, which was his mission, to bring his history, his culture, his technology, his religion to the Black and brown people of the world. The schools built by the religious institutions organized by Negroes were the same thing, a question of cultural assimilation. So now what we have really is the Black bourgeois attending these big colleges, the bigger the better. Big 10 schools, high profile, high price, elite schools, or some of the HBCUs on the other side, which are the traditional bastions of Black bourgeois worldviews. And they're trained in these elitist traditions, either in the Big 10 universities or otherwise, or the HBCUs, and they emerge from these institutions too refined to take part in certain things, and too refined to live in certain communities. The next step of this indoctrination process after your education would be religion, which actually starts first. And I'd like to just draw your attention to some of the things they teach you. Say, for example, Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 through 40. 39, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. 40, if they take your shirt, hand them your coat as well. Or perhaps Romans 13:12, for there is no authority except from God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority of God bring judgment upon themselves. So stop resisting, right? I think we've all heard that phrase somewhere before. Let's go on to capitalism. You take your six-figure education that your parents paid for, or that you borrowed the six figures for, and you parlay that into a six-figure salary. You go out, you get your big job, and you start to gravitate towards elite places, elite opinions, elite worldviews, physically, socially, financially. You extricate yourself from the so-called Black community. Goes back to what you were saying, Dukes. There are no Blacks in my neighborhood. I'm the only Black person in my office, and taking pride in these kinds of statements. and living this kind of isolating lifestyle, taking on the conspicuous consumption. I call it the Tyler Perry effect. Got to have the Tesla. You can't drive the GMC. It's got to be the Tesla or the Audi or something to that effect. So you get your expensive suburban home, your elite white neighborhood, your expensive furnishings, expensive vehicles, toys, clothing, accessories, and expensive private schools for your kids. Okay. I would say that the next process of indoctrination into the Black bourgeois would be the acceptance of white supremacy, which is probably more heavily ingrained in American and Black bourgeois culture than any other concept, which makes them, white supremacists, the supreme authority in all things. Think about it. Religion, education, miseducation, capitalism, violence in all manners, destruction, piracy, pillage, plunder. They are the authority in all of these things. And in my opinion, and in E. Franklin Frazier's opinion, the Black bourgeois attach themselves through these types of social constructs, through these types of mechanisms, either voluntarily or involuntarily, or a little bit of both, so that they can gain acceptance from the community that they want to be a member of, which is not their own. There's one other social construct here that is not mentioned, which really should be, and that is the media. In almost every form imaginable, constantly, for centuries, the media attack on Black and brown people in the US and all over the world has been phenomenal and sustained. We just started having positive media representation probably in the mid to late 90s. So the media would be the other construct that I think that
Tim,
is not here. Yeah.
actually, this is a question for both of you guys, but do you think that the Black bourgeois, do they resent Blackness or do they resent Black poverty? So in other words, in pursuing this strata and in wholly embracing the things that you've mentioned and the indoctrination process that you've mentioned, are they doing this in an effort to transcend Blackness, or what? Do you think that there's an animosity there that transcends even like the general sort of like white bigotry that we have in this country, and some of the animosity that we see expressed in what do y'all think about that?
I think if you look at K through 12 education, there's no way that doesn't create animus in young Black kids who are especially going to school in white neighborhoods for the Black population at large, because they wouldn't have to sit there and be embarrassed by learning about being a slave and, fatherless babies and all this propaganda that they push in schools like that. Schools that I went to, education that I experienced as a child of the Black bourgeois. Don't get it twisted. I'm a member of this group. That's why I can say this stuff. I think there is an animosity. I think if you go to a Big Ten school and you're taught these traditions of elitism and you come out too good to do certain things, there's definitely an animosity for the poor, downtrodden, overlooked people in your community. Forget it. Religion, we already know. And capitalism, we know that that's an exploitative thing, and that it is poverty and capitalism is your fault. It's your shortcoming. You have done this to yourself, and don't come to me crying because you don't have any money. And white supremacy speaks for itself, Dukes.
I think that's always been the goal, to transcend that level of Blackness. I think that as listening to Tim, the goal has always been, especially for, I think that how we celebrate it, as in what our goal is, quote unquote, up from freedom, whatever. So what's the goal? The goal is to become not quote unquote free, but that class of American. So African Americans seem like we're trying to be that quote unquote middle class African American, be a part of that bourgeoisie. That's the goal. And those goals are to get there is to get that level of education, get that level of job, and get that level of being in that certain group or program or organization. And for many, that's the idea of making it right. It has nothing to do with the freedom or freeing your people or elevating your people. Is you know what, I need to get to this status. And for some, it's a lifelong status. It's never enough for. It's just how much effort it takes. It's just enough for you to make it, not really enough to bring up next no one else, right? So it's just there, and also the goalpost is always moving. So that's always the problems that I think that it's transcending the race into that bourgeoisie, and by doing that, you do take on a lot of capitalistic, white supreme notions that you don't even think that you don't even realize that you're doing. And then I want to be here. I want to be in this neighborhood. I want to be in this school. And I'm not trying to fight against the system. I want to be a part of the system.
I have this slide here that I think speaks to the results of the indoctrination process, which are all the resources from all that education, the six-figure job, the life experience, the earnings, investments, dividends, etc., are given right back to the status quo in pursuit of capitalism and the American dream. So it is a net gain for capitalism and the status quo. And it is net zero for communities of color in the cultural other, because none of those resources return. Why? Because nobody wants to be there. It's a community that we do not want. And let's talk about those status symbols that you just talked about. Your house that gives you all this status in the Black community, no matter where it is, you probably got it through one of these guys, right? Matt Ishbia, United Wholesale Mortgage, #1 in loans in the United States, $108.5 billion in 2023. Rocket Mortgage, $78 billion in 2023, also settled a huge discrimination lawsuit in 2021. Bank of America, same thing, $28 billion. These are the guys who own your house, your status symbol, the origin of your car. Now, the car that sits in your driveway, what is it here? Auto, let me find it in my notes. Oh, origin of status symbols. These guys here own your house. Okay, according to autonews.com, the top vehicles among Black folk are the Honda Civic, the Toyota Corolla, the Toyota RAV4, and the Toyota Camry. Okay, but Black Bourgeois in Atlanta drive Tesla. I just want y'all to know. These are the people who are holding all the income that your status symbols create. This next flyer here, your furnishings in your big, beautiful house in the suburbs. Let's go middle of the road, Ashley Furniture. This guy, the founder, is worth $6.1 billion. His son, the president and CEO of Ashley Furniture, is worth $3.7 billion. Okay. And I just want you to take a look at those slides and all of those people and realize what E Franklin Frazier is saying. You are in pursuit of these things that you have to get from the status quo. You are seeking their acceptance and membership in their group, and you're giving them all of your talent, all of your time, all of your resources to the detriment of the people who can help you build a community. One of my questions from earlier that I did not get to ask is, why can't Black people build a viable community? Other groups do it. Does it mean they're inherently racist because you have a Hispanic community? Are they all racist? Does it mean you're inherently racist if you have an all Black community in the suburbs? You don't want white people there? I don't think that's what it means. Why can't Black people build a viable community?
I don't think that's what the goal is. I think that if we talk about the leadership coming from that quote unquote Black bourgeoisie, Black bourgeoisie, or what we're taught to want is never to be isolated. It's ingrained. It's we isolate into the larger aspects of the society. So as other people have done whatever they want to do as coming here or accepting themselves in America, we've been told, or it's ingrained in us, let's try to be as American as possible. And so that's why the goal is, like I said, the goal is let's get to that middle class. And those things that you said that people have, are we saying that they're bad to have? Because sometimes when you're making money, it's okay to have that money. But what are we saying with getting these stats items? Are they wrong to have them, or is it how do we attain them? What we do with them?
No, I don't think it's wrong to have them. I just think it's a waste to have them. I think it's a waste of capital. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste. I have a slide here for you that is relevant to this point that I wanted to bring out later, but I'll just bring it out now. Let's see. I'm sorry.
I think while you're looking for that, Tim, is that also it's like from when he did that. Now we're like 3 generations away from when he wrote this. And
Yeah.
now it's like people like you were talking about earlier. How do people look at blackness? Remember, we talking about like 30 years ago, maybe for us when we were in our 20s or whatever. It was something. Now for this new generation, it's something totally. It doesn't mean what it meant to us. So now it's another generation away from it. But when he was writing this, it meant something.
It means nothing now. It means
like,
nothing
now. Or it means something different, right? The different that won't equate to that level of freedom or being self-sufficient, as in what he was saying. Like one thing that he does, Franklin does say, is that through all this consumption, which you're going through all this consumption, where is the political base?
Where's the power? Black spending power reaches record $1.6 trillion, but net worth falls. Okay. Yeah, it's not wrong to have this stuff, but what is it for, bro? What is it for? So you can pull up to the stoplight in your Tesla and be like, yeah, I got this Tesla, dog. What is it for? The resources wasted, the money spent on status symbols, which mean absolutely nothing. Did you see the NFL player get pulled out of his $270,000 automobile and thrown on the ground before his game? Or he was probably about to go make 400 grand, in that one game. You know what I mean? So, what is it for?
The funny thing, he talks about this in the book also. He said, even though we get all these things, white supremacy does not eliminate this behavior. So even though we're trying to do this within the system, if we're not trying to eliminate the white supremacy, none of this matters.
Look at what Carol says. Let me read Carol's comment. We have some other ones as well that I think are starting to cue us into another part of the conversation. So Carol says, we are defined and controlled by others that learned creating division amongst blacks has an enduring, beneficial, commercial, and acceptable way to live. How do you propose to change this perception? Tanya says a false sense of rising out of poverty. And then Heather mentioned Black Wall Street. And then Carol offers another comment a little further down. We cannot build a community while continuing to be a beneficiary of the white system when it is driven by numbers, population, number of educated, access to services, etc. Sultan then says, our flesh has no value unless it produces something of value for the status quo. Black self-esteem is created from economic achievement. We were branded and now we wear brands. Another comment, this is why we need to cooperatively build our own institutions. The value needs to be good health, strong relationships, freedom from debt, sovereignty over our time and labor. And then most recently, not against buying things, but we need to be more conscious about who is benefiting from our consumption. I don't want Elon Musk getting richer off our community. So that sort of great stream of comments there from our listeners.
All those are wonderful comments and right in line with what it is that we've been talking about. The resources that we create $1.6 trillion in 2021, but we don't have any of it. Matter of fact, our net worth fell. Okay, we spent $1.6 trillion, but I think the average net worth of the African American family is $44,000. Okay, what kind of sense does that make? And I think it's like E. Franklin Frazier was talking about, it's a failure of leadership. I talked in the video about Negroes, the Black bourgeoisie being harnessed. And this is what I'm talking about, that team of horses right here. Here's 6 good ones, right? Will Smith, Coca-Cola and Montclair. He's not as good as he used to be, but Eddie Murphy, Toyota. Black people drive 4 of the most popular cars are Toyotas, and it's all black people. Jamie Foxx, look at his endorsements, Apple, Canon, Coors, Grey Goose, stuff you can't pronounce. Same thing with Idris Elba, Michael B. Jordan, Acura, Coach, Dior, Louis Vuitton. What does our community need with these things? Adidas, Apple, Brioni, Capital One. Yeah, we got to have a bank, but there's some black banks out there. We got to have cabinets in our kitchen. Tell me there ain't no black cabinet makers. Some of these things we need to go to the status quo for, but not all of them. And I want to just go back into. Go ahead. You got something?
So I'm wondering then, do Will Smith and Michael B. Jordan and Sam Jackson, do they have more of an obligation to pursue the community good, the black community good, more so than, say, Leonardo DiCaprio or Al Pacino or Joaquin Phoenix have to confront capitalism and also promote more communal systems of economy or social cooperation? You know, like we're now critiquing them because they are black men in the case of the slide you showed. But like, why isn't Tom Hanks also responsible for making a similar commitment to social good? What do you guys think?
I think they are. I think they are responsible, but sometimes if I think there's conversations that are had behind closed doors, and these are one of those kind of one of those conversations that are had behind closed doors, right? Of course they do, but keep in mind I can care less what white people do. I'm not judging myself about how white people handle things, because if I did, the progress will be limited. Because if they wanted better, they're in control. They could have done better. So I've never want to use white people in any of their actions as a ruler. Secondly, would be, like I said, these are behind closed door situations, and there's always some way been a disdain for that upper middle class. Those people who's been given a lot, right, but have not returned any of those type of things. In this type of society, I mean, they're applauded. They're put in the newspapers. They are celebrated because of their achievements. But at the same time, they're celebrated also with the understanding of the responsibility of to pull up and pull up other people, or help out other people. And the goal is they have not done that. And if they do it, they still do it under the guise of white supremacy. They still do it under the guise of capitalism. But I'm gonna help you out. I'm gonna try to make sure I make my profit off of you also. There will be no free game. I'm never gonna try to put you up on game. It's gonna be a charge for. So this is where they are responsible, as you're saying. Those people are responsible. But now, if I'm looking at somebody within a certain community and they have it, and they knowing how the society works, or is against them, or how it was just by the grace of God that they made it, and for them not to share that wisdom,
okay,
then it's up on them. And also part about that is, and so if they've been trained, as in W.E. Du Bois would say, that talented tip who've been trained to lead, and then don't lead, then that's the problem. I think that's why W.E. Du Bois dropped that theory, because he saw that they didn't want, even though those talented temps that were there, they took the mantle of not helping out more black people who looked like them coming out the South or whatever. They took up the mantle of, let me just be like white people. and pick up and try to move on to another class. So that's what it has. And so then that's where we go to the point where the major problem is that we have all these things, all this money, but out of all the stuff that we have not established a political base to make movement, to make true change.
Absolutely.
So this is where you could talk about poor people, poor Black people, and what they're not doing right, because that's where a lot of it goes to. But then at the same time, those people who they're not doing anything to pull back, to push back, or to motivate those who don't have, or like Tim was saying, not moving, not going back to help out people come from the same neighborhoods they came out of, to teach them better, to do better, to learn better. And I'm saying all those things at the same time. I'm saying all those things under the guise of white supremacy. What makes me think that they're not doing better, right? But the goal is like, okay, you have it. What are you doing to help somebody move, or what are you doing something to help somebody come up to get to the status where you at? And so for me, a lot of my problem will always be, so you have Black churches, but then they're collecting their tithes or whatever. And the only thing I'm seeing is more churches being built. They're being bigger, but where's the outreach, right? Where's the outreach to change lives, whatever? And that same thing can be said with the civic organizations. You're there, you're there, you have them, but then where is the outreach for change? Because if you look back for the last 50, 60 years, everything is the same. So either you're non-effective, right, in outreach that you're giving out or that you're doing, or you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Because the communities look the same. You can look at any community where you are sitting right now, they look the same way or even worse 40 years ago. Now, they may look better depending on gentrification of white people moving in.
I think with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that, the Black bourgeois have not accepted that responsibility. Their own community is poison to them. They don't want to be involved. It's not the community that they want. And that just isn't how communities were built. I just wanted to show you all this one more slide because, I'm about done here. You have the harness. I wanted to show you what Shaq did for John Schnatter. May of 2018, Papa John's founder used some racially charged language during a conference call, which went viral. Okay, his stock subsequently fell 11% in hours, knocking $70 million off his net worth, leaving him estimated at $700 million at that time. By July of 2018, just 2 months later, the company shares had fallen 25% since his remarks. That's real money. So what he did was he went and got himself a ringer, right? March 2019, not even a year later, NBA Hall of Famer Shaquille O'Neal joined Papa John's board of directors and became a spokesman for the brand. The next year, Papa John introduced the Shaq-a-roni. This is what Shaq became on behalf of Papa John, right? He probably got 10 times the money that he lost once he brought Shaq on board, right? And this, again, is not economic power. This is economic influence. We influenced his decision, to go out there and get his money back. But that's all we did. We can't hurt him financially. We can't hurt Ashley Furniture, Toyota, Honda, none of them financially. We can't do nothing for them except give them our money. We can't hurt them, but they don't give any of it back. I don't see any of them walking through any community that I'm familiar with. Ever. So John Schnatter with his Shaq-a-roni pizza and Shaq with his harness and the bit in his mouth probably made him more money than he ever lost. Shaq brought the masses back. How come Shaq can bring the masses back to Papa John's and Michael B. Jordan can lead the masses to Louis Vuitton and Sam Jackson to Capital One, but can't lead them and rally them in their own community for their own things? Here's another slide for you that I wanted to illustrate to you about the net worth of Black people and why we have no political power. Okay, Black-owned businesses, 2.7% of all the businesses in the United States are owned by Black people. We're 14% of the population. Hispanics, doing much better. White folks doing the best, the moral majority. Asians, even better. They own more businesses than their percentage in the United States. As for land is concerned, 41.7% of Black households, okay, own their home, and probably even lower than that in commercial property. Net worth between 2019 and 2022, the median net worth for Black families skyrocketed to $44,000 a year. Okay, while white families, 284.3. So there's obviously a disconnect between our leadership, our spending habits, and our business acumen and our land acquisition. We're the only community that is not doing any of this. Well, I won't say any, that's an absolute, but we're the only community that's doing very, very, very little of these things, you know? And as a result, our spending power is up. We got these great jobs, went to these beautiful schools, got these big homes, but we still ain't got shit. No money, no political power, no respect socially, none of that, because we don't have a community. And I think my point in synopsis is what E Franklin Frazier was trying to say is this is not how communities are built and maintained. The Black bourgeois doesn't even seem to want a Black community. It's like poison to them. Like I said, their existence is based on excising themselves from the so-called ghetto, which is the de facto definition, representation, and image of the Black community. It's no place anyone desires. And until we raise awareness about these things that we've talked about, you know, it's going to be difficult to change this. I think that's the solution. Awareness. Have to be aware.
I think you're right. I think you're right, because the thing is, the goal is always to escape it, never to embrace it, but to escape it. Because no matter because how we look at it is bad. Everything about it is bad. Let's escape it.
Mm-hmm.
And we never define what we're escaping to. Only thing we know is white institutions.
Yeah, we're escaping from $1.6 trillion of financial influence. 1.6 trillion is a lot of money that we give directly away from ourselves, from our communities, back to the status quo, because that's all we know. I think it's a tragedy, and I think E Franklin Frazier was right then, and it's correct now.
I think let's take a look at a few comments before we close out, because there have been a few new ones. But what this brings to mind for me is I saw a statistic not too long ago that said something to the effect that although the United States has like a fairly substantial per capita income, and among the maybe top handful in the world, if you take out the top 10% of all earners from that per capita average, then the U.S. income, average income, per capita income, drops to somewhere near the bottom of all industrialized countries. And so I'm imagining that if there was a similar analysis done on Black wealth in America, then that number would be there would be an even bigger divide and gap between the top 10% of all Black earners disaggregated from the average Black per capita income in this country. So that's one thing that I wondered about. But here are a few comments. Sultan says, showing leadership means losing your place in the supreme community. Thus, keep stepping and fetch it, shut up and dribble, or grab nuts and rap. Let's see here. Carol says, a few successful Blacks cannot exert enough influence to make generational changes. And then Letitia says, I think we need to step away from expecting the white bourgeoisie to give a shit about the Black community, focus on us. And I think she made that comment around the time when I was mentioning Tom Hanks and them. And I wasn't suggesting necessarily that white wealthy folks come in and try to share wealth with Black people, but more that white wealthy people don't seem to have, or we don't seem to press them into social good in the same way, or was wondering maybe if we ought to, or if we don't do enough of that. But all this speaks to me is that capitalism doesn't ultimately work. It only creates a funnel where a small group of people over time acquire a concentration of wealth, and the rest of us end up suffering. And when you inject racism into that conversation, then black people and brown people are the ones who catch the most financial hell and all sorts of other hell in addition to that. So I guess that's my last word for the evening. What do you guys want to say before we finish up?
Dukes, you got one? Because I got these lyrics for you.
I will. I think that it's not saying. I think we always said like everybody has their place and everybody got to play their role. And in this level of critique of this certain class, is never. We're not saying that other people are not at fault. As we were talking about how black people are not buying homes and not bad businesses. There's a systematic issue going on at play there. Why that is. But then there are some people who have benefited from this institution, and you would think that one, they would share the wealth a little bit and see the responsibility that they have. And I think that because it's now we're talking about 2 or 3 generations we removed from it, there's no connection. There's no responsibility. And I think that's the problem. And so this is where critique comes from. It's like, okay, I see you doing this, but where your responsibility? And some of it is, so much of it is in the action is, let me move away. Let me be the only one. And let me, and we pride ourselves on being that, the only black person in the neighborhood. And we celebrate each other for those type of things. And it's just been so many generations of it that I think we just totally lost our way from. We totally lost our way from getting free.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're in pursuit as the Black bourgeois of the American dream and all its trappings and everything that it means to us. And I think there's a couple of phrases that are predominant in this discussion with the Black bourgeois. I like nice things. And I did this. Nobody helped me. This was me. I did this by myself. There was nobody there to help pull me up and yada, yada, yada. So there are those 2 threads that are very common in this discussion. I like nice things is, probably the most prominent as an excuse to move to a neighborhood that where nobody looks like you, that you really can't afford. And
because that's how we define. That's how we define ourselves, and that's how we define our humanity by that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he talks about. That so somehow we find ourselves caught up in that system of capitalism, of defining our humanity by what we own more than anybody else. And maybe because that some of it is coming from residual slavery. Here I am, let me be seen, but still being defined by something that as you can consume is the problem.
Yeah. The statement is, oh, Murray doing good. He got a brand new Tesla. You know what I mean? Murray doing good. He just bought an $800,000 house. That don't mean Murray doing good. That Murray could still be living check to check. Murray could be miserable. Murray
tired. Murray still could be tired trying to maintain all that type of stuff.
Murray stressed out, out there in the office with nobody to look like him, listening to nigga jokes and stuff like that. That don't mean Murray's doing that good. But according to capitalist philosophy and the American way of life, well, if you have red bottoms in the Tesla, you are doing good.
So let's put them on this. Let's put them on the front of the magazine, and let's celebrate them. Let's put them. You know what I'm saying? This is what we should attain to.
Yeah, and tell them that to tell the black masses to buy Louis Vuitton. Yeah.
I think we need to have a part 2 to this conversation, brothers, because we, as a group, we offer a lot of insight and even training and other conversation around anti-capitalism and things of that nature. I think that we ought to revisit that within the range and within the realm, particularly of the Black bourgeoisie. And maybe that's something that you could kick off for us in a couple more months, Tim, maybe after the election or something.
Oh, absolutely.
We can come back.
Absolutely. Black bourgeois. Kamala Harris. Wow, man.
No, the thing is that you're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Good example.
Spent 20 years locking up black folks. You know, Attorney General of California just locking niggas up wholesale for 25, 30 years. Black bourgeois, HBCU, you know, denigrating and marginalizing black folks for her whole career. You know, now she's the favorite black daughter of the nation.
Oh, look at there, Letitia. Oh no, we're going to get into it. I mean, Tim and Dukes, they'll cover black liberals, and I'll talk about all the other liberals. We have you covered. We have you covered. Definitely, we definitely talk about that on our page, and we will definitely continue to talk about it in live conversations.
Now, at the same time, we're not saying that don't vote for the sister. It is
I mean, listen, hey, look, that's a great segue into the conversation that we're going to have in a couple more weeks. Tuesday, October 8th, we will have volume 4 of our own ongoing series called The Race to November, where we discuss the election through the lens of race and justice. So we have already had 3 of these conversations. They've each been deeply engaging, highly interesting, based on what we have heard from our listeners. And we hope that you come back and join us on October 8th for volume 4. We'll talk about all the current events, everything that has happened since the last time that we got together. We were together, what was that, maybe 2 weeks ago, guys? And so
last week.
Last week? Okay, yeah, it was last week.
No, but last week it was last week because we had we talked about that, and the next day we had the
book discussion.
Yeah,
right.
The movie discussion. Yeah,
the movie discussion.
Yeah. So come back for that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't follow our page, definitely do that now so you can stay apprised of all of the events that we're holding, and then other insights that we offer along the way each and every day. So with that, brothers, it's been a wonderful conversation. I've deeply enjoyed it and learned a lot. Brother Tim, you did a wonderful job putting this.
He want to end with a lyric.
I got lyrics.
Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead, do it.
Okay. All right. Wait a minute. I just drew a blank. All right. And in reference to the black bourgeois. Okay. And to think that blacks spend all their money on big colleges, yet most of y'all come out confused. I'm gonna leave it at that.
All right, deep as always, the militant wise one signing us off. All right, good brothers. Hey, listen, you take care. To all of our listeners who've been checking in with us and engaging throughout, we deeply appreciate you. We hope that you come back, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
We got to get back up here soon. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back. All right, y'all. Real Powers people.
All right, later, y'all.